מדע לעולם. הסדרה עוסקת בהיבטים שונים של מדע פתוח. הרצאות תינתן על ידי מומחים בתחום מחו"ל וגם מהארץ. סדרת ההרצאות היא יזמה משותפת של מערך הספריות של אוניברסיטת בר אילן ו-OpenAIRE. OpenAIRE הוא פרויקט של האיחוד האירופי שמקדם מדע פתוח, ואוניברסיטת בר אילן היא השותפה הישראלית בפרויקט. אנחנו ב-OpenAIRE מתמקדים בשני ערוצי פעולה עיקריים. הקמת וביסוס תשתית תקשורת, חכמה, פתוחה וברת קיימא, שתהיה אחראית לניהול הכולל של שימור והנגשה של תוצרי המחקר. כמו כן, לפרויקט יש רשת נציגים מומחים בתחום המקדמים מדע פתוח ומספקים תמיכה והכשרה במדע פתוח בכל אחת מהמדינות השותפות בפרויקט, זה 34 מדינות, יש National Open Access Desk, שאנחנו קוראים לזה נועד, וכל אחד מהנועד אחראי לסייע לכל בעלי העניין, לחוקרים, לגופי המחקר, למממני המחקר ולקובעי המדיניות, בכל הנושאים הקשורים בנושא. מאז יום העיון הקודם שהיה לנו לפני כשנה, אנחנו יכולים לראות את ניצני השינוי ביישום מדע פתוח בארץ. יש יותר פניות של חוקרים, הבאים לשאול איך הם פותחים את תוצרי המחקר שלהם. יש גם בארץ כבר דיונים על הקמת התשתיות הדרושות לקיום מדע פתוח, כמו Institutional Repository, שהיא קיימת כבר החלטה כלשהי להקים Institutional Repository בכל האוניברסיטאות בארץ ו-National Repository. אנחנו זוכים לאוזן קשבת אצל קובעי המדיניות, וגם פתחנו ביוזמה לפנות למו"לים הישראלים שיגדירו מהי מדיניות הגישה הפתוחה שלהם. אני מקווה שבהרצאות שתהיינה בהמשך אנחנו נשמע עוד דברים שקשורים בנושא ועל ההתפתחויות. אני מקווה שתהנו מההרצאה ותפיקו ממנה תועלת, ואתם מוזמנים לפנות אליי כנועד הישראלי בכל שאלה שיש לכם בנושא. תהנו.
תודה רבה שמחה. אני רוצה עכשיו להזמין את דוקטור אולגה גולדין, שהיא מנהלת מערך הספריות והמידע באוניברסיטת בר אילן, לשאת דברי פתיחה. בבקשה אולגה.
Good morning everybody. I will speak in English. So I'm very pleased to open the first event in the series of lectures embracing open science, and to welcome our guest lecturer from Belgium, Miss Inge Van Nieuwerburg from Ghent University. There is no doubt that the open science is already a global event. Science is in continuous transformation. They say that maybe the only constant element is the change itself. And there are three major shifts that we can consider. How scientists collaborate to create knowledge, how scientists find meaning in knowledge, and a change in the relationship between science and society. So open science is the movement to make scientific research, data, and dissemination accessible at all levels of an inquiring society. And it represents a significant change in the way research is conducted, recorded, and disseminated. So we can say open science is a paradigm shift in the modus operandi of research and science impacting the entire scientific process. The academic libraries all over the world are engaged with it and even offer leadership in open science movement. So library is now more than a curator and cataloger of knowledge. It's also an active creator of knowledge. Academic libraries, and of course, I'm also speaking about the libraries in Israel, have an active role in open access, in research data management and open data, in open access publishing and electronic infrastructures such as national and institutional repositories and open science cloud. Citizen science. As a librarians, we are advocates for access to all information. So we like open access. There are a lot of challenges for the academic libraries. How to offer leadership in their institutions. What infrastructure is needed? Technical, staffing, resources. What new skills and competencies are needed for librarians and information professionals to deliver open science? Open science represents a new way for society to engage with science, and libraries have a core role to play in supporting its success. So I wish all of us to get this success and to develop the activities and to play the major role in those activities in our universities and colleges. Thank you very much. And I welcome once again, Ms. Inge Van Nieuwerburg. So please, Inge, the scene is yours.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to join you here. Of course, remotely, that's always easier to jump in than in other circumstances. So that's the advantage of the situation we're in now. Let me share my screen. I have prepared, of course, a little presentation to introduce you to the introduction of open science in Belgium, how we got there. We still have a lot of steps to take, of course, but I would like to guide you a little bit in how we got to the policy that we're in Belgium and Ghent University, of course. To start with, let me explain where I come from. So I'm Inge Van Nieuwerburg. It's always difficult to pronounce. I work at the Book Tower, the Ghent University Library. So Ghent is a city in the Flemish part of the country. So we have a Flemish and a French-speaking part. It's a big university of about 40,000 students and about 8,000 scientific people working there, researchers working there, and in different kind of stages of their career. This is the Book Tower now being renovated. We hope to move in this year. So it's an exciting year for us after a year working mainly from home. I have been working on open science themes since I worked at the Book Tower, which was 2004. But already the Book Tower was involved in open access to publications at an early stage. Our former had a librarian, Sylvia van Petegem, she now retired about a year ago, initiated the concept of open access around 2000 in our university. At that time, Herbert van de Zompel had been working for the university, well, up to 2000. And Herbert van de Zompel is one of the key figures in technical evolutions in open access. Some of you might know it. I'll just mention it, the OAI-PMH protocol, which is an exchange protocol for open access repository. He was, together with Patrick van Hoogstenbach, one of my colleagues, one of the inventors of that protocol. And they were very, very involved in the whole process. So for us, it is a logical evolution to flow from providing information through the library into open access to publications and then later on to open science. I myself have been, as said, involved since 2004. And of course, we have different projects. We started in 2005 with a driver project, which was digital repositories for open access infrastructure, and then into OpenAIRE, which I will talk about later on. But I'm also involved in different national and international groups. And it was very important to have these connections to be able to, on the one hand, follow what's going on outside of our own country and how to implement things that discovered that were implemented in other countries, how to implement it in Belgium, in our own university as well, but also how to adapt it into our own environment. Because as you know, we all work in our own context, the context of our country, the context of our university. And it's always important to keep that in mind when developing policies and work with a certain theme. Now, I promised to say a few words about open science in general, just to make sure that we're all on the same pace. So the most important thing I wanted to say about open science is actually in this slide, because open is about transparency. It's about being open about your research. It's about giving access to research, but also to be able to trustworthiness of research. It's about availability and free availability, but also about reusability. You can do a lot more with science than keeping it to yourself, and it's shared when it's reusable by others. New discoveries can be made, and unknown links can be put between different kind of research. So transparency is the key word in open science. And there's a lot in open science going on. The most known themes are, of course, open access and open data. Open access to publications, open data, data being open, but there's also open educational resources, open source software, open peer review, which is discussed also quite a lot, open notebooks. So it's about the whole research cycle, opening it up as open as possible, because you can't open everything, of course. There are things that are confidential. There are things that have a lot of research. There's a lot of privacy involved. So you have to be careful with that. But the general idea is as open as possible in several steps of the process of your research. And we have, so we don't want secret science in the end. And we have seen it now in these times with the COVID-19 disease, how important it is to work together to be able to know very quickly what is working, what is not working. Because in open science, it's not only about the successful research, it's also a plea to be more transparent about the non-successful research, because you learn a lot from things that didn't work, that have been researched and that, well, apparently didn't work. So you should take that into account. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that the exchange of data has been very important, that preprints are very important. So preprints, this is the dissemination of texts before they have been peer-reviewed. This has, of course, you have to be careful with these kind of texts, but it means that a lot quicker researchers around the world know about the evolutions in research and the different levels and the different institutions in the different projects, and you can react much faster and adapt where needed. Let me first say a few words about open access to publications, which is the long-running open science aspect almost for 30 years, because already at, well, in the beginning, mid-1990s, arXiv started with a preprint server for physics. arXiv.org is the most known repository, preprint repository in the world, I would say. They started, as said, in the 90s, and what they wanted to do is exactly what I just mentioned, have a more rapid dissemination of research and more disseminated research. So not only for people who are subscribed to a certain journal. And it's about preprints, so publications before peer review. But very, very soon, arXiv.org had a very good reputation. And the preprints that you find there are of a high quality. So that's an important factor as well with preprints. The moment that you disseminate them, you have to be quite sure about your preprint before you open it up to the world. So sometimes people say, yeah, with all these preprints, this jeopardizes the quality of research, of publications. It can happen, of course. You quicker get some debate, but you also see a lot of well thought through preprints because people don't just want to throw something up in the open that is not qualitative enough. So that was about preprint servers that came actually in the early mid-90s, but it quickly evolved into the idea of open access to publications, so the peer-reviewed version of these texts talking about research outcomes. And in open access to publications, we work with the term self-archiving, which is actually opening a text yourself into the open. Self-archiving, so the scientist archives a publication in an openly available repository. This is also known as the Green Road to Open Access. More and more from the 2000s, you get more and more really open access journals. So journals that you don't pay a subscription to, but that are freely available. And this is known as the Gold Road to Open Access. We see the evolution from open access journals as in a journal in the classical sense to more open access platforms which are a bit different than journals because they are more interactive and they have another way of working. But in the end, it's the same idea of opening a text to the world. This is the goal, the road to open access. And the last 10, 15 years, we saw a lot of hybrid journals. Hybrid journals are actually subscription-based journals where you can pay. This is the paid Gold Road, where you can pay to open your one article in that subscription journal. It's a route we don't really like a lot because you pay actually twice for a subscription and then the author for getting it out in the open. For Green Open Access is self-archiving, so you deposit a version, could be a preprint, could be a peer-reviewed peer-reviewed manuscript, but not in the layout of the publisher, can be the publisher version. So self-archiving is that you deposit a version of your publication in an open repository. There are many open repositories over the world. You have subject repositories like archive.org, which are more oriented to certain disciplines, and you have institutional repositories or multidisciplinary repositories. Multidisciplinary repositories, and one example is Zenodo, an open repository that has been developed within the OpenAIRE projects. We at Ghent University, we have an open repository, we call it Biblio, and has evolved from just an abbreviation that we use to really the name of our academic bibliography / open repository. So you deposit a version of your publication and you open it sometimes after an embargo period. You add links to project information, to data sets, whatever. So quite some context is added to that policy. Now, some publishers allow you to self-archive the preprint, some post-print, some the publisher version. Luckily, we have something called Sherpa Romeo to check what publishers allow with the texts, because in many cases, this is important to know, researchers give away their copyrights to the publisher to be able to be published. And this means that the publisher is the right holder at that time. So the publisher can decide whether you can open your text or not. Now, some allow that and some do not. And this link to the Sherpa Romeo database gives you an overview of many of the international publishers, how they work and what they allow and what they don't allow. This is, for example, a picture of our own repository. As you can see, I just selected the open access publications, which are about 60,000 publications at the moment, that you can access freely from our repository. And as you can see, we indicate them with an open access icon to make sure that you know that you can use them. Very important to know for open repositories is not that it's just a repository with open texts, but it's also an open infrastructure, which means that machines can browse through the texts, that there is an API, an application interface that makes sure that between machines, the text can be found. So browsers, services on top of repositories can find this information and disseminate it to their own groups. So that's a very important aspect as well. The open repository does not only consists of open publications, freely available publications, but is also an open infrastructure. So there is software used with an API that allows you to exchange information. It is also a repository with a standardized metadata scheme to be exchanged. So you hear that there's a lot of standardization going on in this open repository world, and this is needed to be able to exchange information, to have an interoperable, as we say, interoperable interface. Now, on the other hand, there is the gold road, which is the route of open access journals and now more and more open access platforms. Now, these journals are not subscription-based, they are free to the reader, and there are different business models behind it. The most known is, of course, the business model with an APC, where the author pays an article processing charge to be published in such an open access journal. Lately, we have heard of quite some exuberant APCs, up to 10,000 euros even, which is really crazy. But there are other models to work with these open access journals. There are memberships by researchers, memberships by libraries. For example, the Open Library of Humanities works with the membership of libraries. So that makes sure that they have the money to disseminate these journals. Crowdfunding, or they are supported by scholarly society. There are several business models, but of course for commercial publishers, the author pays model is the dominant one. And this is not an easy route for us as libraries, as universities, because this costs a lot of money. Sometimes even more than you would have subscriptions. And this causes some friction on the financial basis between subscription model and an open access model, which is a pity because open access to research shouldn't cost that much. Several funders that are in favor of open access to publications because they want the research that they fund to be disseminated as widely as possible have formed a coalition, Coalition S, to design some boundaries to open access to publications to be sure that this happens and that grantees open up their research as openly as possible, but without the exuberant prices, preferably. So they devised the Plan S. With this Plan S, they wanted to, let's say, conquer the barriers to open access. And by 2021, which is now, the members of this coalition, which are about 2022, have looked at the latest figures, big funders in Europe and in America are part of Coalition S. They have the principle to open up all the scholarly communication resulting from their projects into open access. And they formed a coalition to make sure that they can support the authors, the researchers in this endeavor, because it's easy as a funder to devise some rules, to set some rules, but you are nothing with these rules if you don't support your authors to adhere to them as easily as possible, because that is very, very important. The Coalition S, Plan S, well, this coalition devised 10 principles which are important for open access to publications. I'm just taking out a few of them, and one very important one is that above all, the author should retain their copyright so that they don't transfer their copyright to the funder, which means that the author, him, herself, will remain in charge of the rights, the copyrights of the publication. So that's one thing. And then you grant an open access journal or a repository a license, an open license, such as a Creative Commons license, a non-exclusive license to disseminate the information, the publication. So that is the principal idea behind it. Let the author keep the copyright him herself, and then give a license, an open license, a Creative Commons license to the one disseminating that the publication. And that can be an open access journal, an open access platform, that can be a repository. So this is all possible. And they also say that where applicable, the open access publication spheres are to be covered by funders or the research institutions, and not by the individual researchers. And there's still quite some way to go. Funders do make it an eligible cost, but they don't want exuberant costs like 10,000 euros to be paid. So they have some boundaries here and there. So these are, you see the 10 principles here. I just pick out that copyright one and the fees one because these are quite important in this model. Now, for example, the European Commission, for example, is an important funder for an institution like mine in Ghent University. And in the new program, Horizon Europe, that will start this year, they will implement these rules. So it's something important to take care of. Of course, the main principle is immediate open access. I almost forgot. So the moment you publish, the text should be open. Now you have all these open access texts, quite some information out there, ready to be read, transparent, but well, you can only be transparent or gain trustworthiness if you know the data behind it. And this picture illustrates what has been the case for many, many years, that when you asked for a publication and the data behind it, that it was not really clear where the data were, who was responsible for the data. They could be in very obscure formats, so cannot be accessed or whatever. So there were quite some problems with data and reusing of data and verifying data. So what do we do with data in this environment? You don't want to throw away your data as a researcher. You actually would like to take good care of your data, also for yourself, so that you can go back to these data. But for years, the researchers had to cope themselves, just devise what to do with the data, put it on a hard drive, on a DVD or whatever to take care of it. Slowly, there were more and more like services like shared drives in the university or outside the university, more and more, but still this was a very closed environment and not really transparent what is where. So data management became more and more of a topic as well. And first, of course, we talked a lot about open data, putting your data out in the open so it can be reused and verified. But wait, if you want to reuse the data, you have to know what it is, what are the rights, what format is it, what's in it, is there a standard on what this data is about? So then the concept of fair data gained more and more traction because you need findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So you have to help the data to be discovered automatically. The metadata should be easily found. It should be in a standardized form. So you have to be able to interpret it as a human as well as a machine. And identifiers. Identifiers are so important, persistent identifiers, not only identifiers for the data, but also, for example, for people. And that's how, for example, ORCID came into existence. ORCID is an identifier worldwide used to identify one person, with a unique identifier. So, for example, in my university, we start to mandate our ORCIDs for our researchers because it's asked all over the place when you apply for funds, when you write a publication. Many publishers ask for ORCIDs, and it's easier to identify the author exactly who it is. We have a lot of Janssens in Flanders, in the Netherlands. Well, is it the right Janssens? Is it the one that we are talking about? And there are numerous examples like this. So you need persistent identifiers. The same with data. You have this data set and you have another data sets, and this one has the identifier 1 and the other one has the identifier 2. And this identifier should be fixed. And even if the data disappears, that identifier may not be reused because you want to be able to cite that data. So I have a publication and I made use of this and that and this and that data set with this unique identifier. And to be persistent, the identifier may never be reused, it should be unique. So that is important for the findability of people for data. It has to be accessible. So you need protocols, again, always for humans and machines to be, you should be able to read that. Interoperable, so again, standardized metadata, sometimes controlled vocabularies are interesting as well. And reusable, so they are sufficiently well described for both humans and computers, and they need to have a usage license. So to be reusable, you need to be clear on the license. As I explained before, you have in publications, you have Creative Commons license, which is an open license. This license tells people in advance what you can do with certain publications. The same with data. For example, a Creative Commons BY license says, well, you can use this, this piece of copyrighted material however you want to use it, doesn't really matter, as long as you say that I am the source, or that this is the source. So Creative Commons license say upfront, in advance, what you can do with copyrighted material. So licenses, usage licenses are very important for reusability of your data. So we have now the concept of fair data established, but remember that open and fair data are not the same, not the same concepts. In the end, all open data should be fair, but not all fair data is open, because fair data is also important for closed data, only accessible, for example, within your research group. Even there, in a closed environment, you still need a unique identifier. You still need to be transparent about the usage license. You need to know that it's a closed data set. You need to know that it should remain closed for 20 years, for example. So the fair concept is usable as well in a closed as is an open environment. And in the end, all open data should be fair, but not all fair data will be open. It's as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. That is a baseline in data. This brings me to this slide, because when you talk about as open as possible, as closed as necessary, you take into consideration that there are different levels of sharing. So sharing can be between two people, between two machines, but sharing can be completely open to everyone without any restrictions. And so there are different levels in between. And that's always very important to understand. When you talk about open data, you talk about the one end of the spectrum being everything is open and can be freely used, modified and shared by anyone. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have very highly secured closed data in a data vault, let's say, so that no one, almost no one can access them. So, but they still can be shared between a few people who have then the key to open the data. So you see, it's a whole spectrum, but on every part of that spectrum, fair is an important concept. The key to manage all this is the data management plan. So in the data management plan, you explain what are the data that I will collect, the data that I will generate, the data that I will work with, what is the volume, the format, how will I document them, where will I store them, who is responsible for the data, who is responsible when I'm gone, because don't remember, researchers are highly, they move a lot. And then sometimes they are a guest professor somewhere, or they move from one university or another. Happens a lot. And they do research in the one university and then in the other. But still in that one university, you still need to be able to access the data that has been generated or collected by this researcher. So the definition of who is responsible and who defines who has access to data should be in that data management plan. So you can always look back at it. Oh yeah, okay, these data, we can open it in 20 years, for example. So all these kinds of responsibilities and decisions are described in the data management plan. Unfortunately, some researchers see a data management plan as an administrative burden, but it really is not. When you work with this, it will make your research much easier, because in advance, you clear some issues that you don't have to think about at the end of your project anymore. If you have to write down documents at the end of your project, what the data was that you have collected and where it's stored and who's responsible and all these kind of things, it takes much more time to do it at the end, looking back at what you have done, than start using it at the beginning, a data management plan. So I really want to stress that. If you hear researchers talk about the administrative burden about it, it can be a very useful tool for them. And that when they forget what I was supposed to do again, because this is not the key of their research, the key is their research itself, then they can just go back to the data management plan and it's all described there. And key is a data management plan is dynamic. You can change throughout your research, your data management plan, because you have seen that there is other types of data that you will include in your research. So I wanted really to stress that this is an important thing. Now, to be able to have a good data management, it's easier to work with some tools. And in Belgium, we have started a consortium, the DMPonline.be consortium. Actually, it started within Ghent University because we use DMP Online for several years now, but since about 2 years, it's now a consortium of Belgian research performing organization. And we have several templates within that DMP Online, not only the European Commission one, but also from our own local funder, FWO. So what does DMP Online do? You have several funders that actually mandate a data management plan. So to force you to have a good plan to manage your data. That's why some researchers see it as an administrative burden, because it's part of project reporting. But then if you mandate this, again, you have to support your researchers in how to do it. So the European Commission has a template, our own funder has a template, and even some departments in our own universities mandate a data management plan and have their own template. We try to advise as much as possible to have it all aligned, but there are always here and there a few differences between the templates. So that's why we need different templates. But in this way, like for example, in this Belgian consortium, we can work together on these templates. We don't, each of one of us has to implement that in their own DMP online or something. No, we do it together and we talk together with the different funders to make sure it's a bit aligned. So it's an important platform. Now, these are two aspects. The main aspects at this moment, open access to publications and data management fair data that I wanted to mention. There's of course open peer review, there's open educational sources and stuff like that, but it would take me too far when I look at the time to go into that. But do know that drivers for open science, whatever the theme is, is that there are public benefits, there are benefits for you, and there are benefits for your research community. So it's the idea that you have excellent science needs open science practices to be more excellent. So I have to keep that in mind. When we talk about public benefits, we also talk about responsible research and innovation and public engagement. Again, the last years, we have seen quite a lot of fake news everywhere around it. Just now with all the vaccines for COVID-19, the conspiracy theories that you read about and what people sometimes post about what can happen when you take the vaccine, it's really damaging for science and for your society. So through transparency of research, you can empower public engagement and you can fight fake news and these alternative facts or whatever you call it. So within the responsible research and innovation area, open science has an important place. And then of course in education, it's very interesting that teacher, whatever they teach, can find recent publications, recent research as well. Not everyone can understand everything, that's logical, but you should be able at least to access it and to know that new research is being done, and then you can look further on what does it mean for my profession, or for me as an industrial engineer in my small company, I wanted to develop a new product. Well, what's the latest on innovation and research in my field? And of course, there's integrity, the research integrity itself. You might know the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity by ALEA, or European Academies, which has also been adopted by the European Commission as a funder. And there as well, you have several references to open science practices, like access to data is as open as possible, as close as necessary, but in line with FAIR principles and things like that. So there's a lot of drivers behind open access. And don't forget, science is for everyone to use. It's not that if you don't belong to academic, it doesn't mean that you cannot access research. How do we work with this at Ghent University? I'm from the library, as I said. And my university has a credo, dare to think. Critical and independent brains study, do research and work at Ghent University. So dare to think is our motto for our credo for quite some years now. Within that set of minds, we have developed at Ghent University Library our own credo, which is facilitating open knowledge creation, which adheres to the dare to think. It's really attached. So facilitating, we are a library, so we support, we facilitate. Open, I have explained a lot about open. We think information, knowledge exchange should be open. And it's about the creation of knowledge. We support our researchers to create knowledge, to work, to do their research. This is in Dutch, but I'll explain in English. As I said, I'm from the library, but we are a lot involved in research. You see in some institutions that libraries especially support education and students. We are very embedded in research. Now, if you look at the structure of our universities, you have on the one hand, all the faculties. We have 11 faculties, and each of these faculties has a faculty library, or they work together to have a shared library. On the other hand, you have the central administration with different directorates, and one of the directorates is the Directorate for Research Affairs. And within that Department of Research Affairs, there are 3 sub-departments, and one of them is the library. So the library is part of the research department of the central university administration. So that is important to know when I talk about how we work in Ghent University on open science, that we are really in close contact with our colleagues, coordinating and supporting all research in the university, but we especially in the library on information, knowledge exchange and preservation and things like that. We have an open access policy since 2010. We implemented an RDM policy in 2016. To support the RDM policy, we have installed at the library a data stewards team in 2019. And in 2020, I'm sorry, there's apparently a microphone open.
אבישג?
אבישג? את יכולה לסגור אותה, את יכולה פשוט לעשות לה מיוט.
Yeah? Okay, so we have signed DORA in 2020. So DORA is a plea for research assessment away from impact factors and taking into account much more than just publication when you assess researchers, departments, and things like that. So we have signed that in 2020. And we are involved in European Open Science projects since 2005. Our mandate is an immediate deposit open access mandate since 2010, and we will revise that this year. So we are revising it now. But at the moment, it's still a mandate for immediate deposit of the full text, a version of the full text, and we ask for the final peer-reviewed manuscript. So this is the manuscript being peer-reviewed, but not in the layout of the publisher. We want it to be deposited in our biblio upon publication and opened as soon as possible when open access is possible. So this is our biblio, which I showed before. Our research data management framework, it's at this moment especially a legal framework and a framework with an advice to our researchers, not that much mandatory stuff, but more and more will be mandated as of this year, next year, like we will look at it, but for example, ORCID will become mandatory for researchers to use. So the research data management becomes more and more important. We have guidelines for researchers to write a data management plan. As I said, with dmponline.be, we support them to adequately document data, securely store and process data, preserve relevant data for a minimum 5 years, and archive a selection and delete what is not selected, and provide access to data within Ghent University and share more widely where possible. So these are the guidelines for our researchers. We support it now, not only with tools, but also with a data steward team since, as I said, 2019. It's a very good team, I must say. And they are based in the library, but they work for the whole university. So every data steward advises, communicates with different faculties, with a subset of faculties. So they each have a broad theme that they work on. Do know with 6 data stewards, you can advise, you can make guidelines, general guidelines specifically for those faculties, but it's not easy to, almost impossible, to have advice for an individual. So still with this team, we can already do a lot to support our researchers, but still it's quite, it's not on an individual basis. We do a lot of training, of course, so that researchers themselves know how to work. We also have a new evaluation system since 2018, I think, which is more a merit and evidence-based approach. So researchers are much less evaluated than they were, and they can, in advance, choose much better what they want to do in the next 5 years. So every evaluation round is 5 years. So it's more an a posteriori global reflection at the end of the cycle, and more about your achievements. What are you proud of? And not like how, oh, this is your list of publications. Oh, you only did 15, not 20 publications. I just say something in these kind of journals, but it's more about what are you proud of? What did you really like, what you have achieved in the last 5 years? And there are some supporting tools, but they are very lightweighted. And we made like a portfolio with guidelines for inspiration only. So the main idea is that the researcher, him or herself, explains what they want to do in the coming 5 years. And then they have a portfolio of tips, inspiration on how they can set this up, and what the key points could be in their career for the next 5 years. And then after the 5 years, you talk about the most significant achievements with your peers. So there is an evaluation report, contributions, achievements, and a global assessment. But as said, this is a joint effort. So you do it together. It's really the idea of collaboration and talk about what research are proud for. So we give some inspiration, a portfolio of research dimensions they can work in. And there are 3 where open science has a role to play, which is an interdisciplinarity, scientific impact, and societal and economic impact. And there we explain how open science practices can be used within their portfolio of research dimensions. So, but again, we don't oblige anything on open science. We have this portfolio of research dimensions which they can use, but they choose themselves, the researchers, how to incorporate that. It's part of an open science culture in your university. Ghent University works within an ecosystem. For example, in Europe, we are part of several networks with different task forces on open science. We are part of the CISAR, which is technical universities or applied universities, and comprehensive universities with big applied sciences faculties. So we are part of CISAR. We are part of the task force on open science. The EUA, European University Association, where I'm in the expert group of open science, which is a very efficient working group, I must say. The Guild and LIGHT. And LIGHT is more like an educational network of universities, the European University Network. And then on the national regional level, we are also in contact with several groups. I will go into that later when talking about Belgium. So we have all these things going on in Ghent University, but for a long time we didn't have that much of policy on the Belgian side. So in steps, it came in place. Important for you to know is that we have a federal country. So there's a federal structure in Belgium, which means we have the federal authorities, Belgium, with the king, the federal government and parliament. And then you have the communities. So the community, the Flemish community, the French community, and the German-speaking community. And then you have the regions, the Flanders region, Brussels Capital region, and Walloon region. So that's quite a lot of factors to take into account. On the Flemish side, the Flemish community and Flanders region have one parliament. So that's easier. But in total, we have 6 governments here. So not easy to work with. And the competence for research is in the regions. So this means that for research and education, we depend on Flanders. But there are still a lot of things on Belgian level that are important to us. For example, copyright. Copyright is a Belgian competence, so that's on the Belgian federal level. And since a few years, we have an open access provision in the Belgian law that allows our authors with a connection to a Belgian institution, to Belgium as a Belgian citizen or whatever, need to have a connection with Belgium. So these authors, in their author contract law, they have a provision that allows the author to make the work available in open access. So the author has this right only for scholarly articles, and only the final peer-reviewed manuscript can be used here. But we have an embargo and period is installed. So we have this provision in the Belgian law that allows us to open up final peer-reviewed manuscripts open up into an open repository. So this should increase open access publications drastically in the coming years. And actually, this will be used, this law, on different levels. Because research is a Flemish, a regional competence, we have a Flemish funder, and the Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles has their own one, which is FNRS. So the Flemish funder FWO, they mandate open access to publications for a long time now in an open repository with an embargo permitted. And for a few years now, just recently actually, they also obliged a data management plan for their projects. Data management plan with a version at 6 months and a version at the end to be delivered. Now, since very recently, namely last year, we have a Flemish Open Science Board. And we have this Flemish Open Science Board initiated by the Flemish government, which was based on advice by a Flemish Council of Science and Innovation in 2016, and a white paper on research data by the Flemish Inter-University Council in 2018. So these two documents were advice and a plea to the Flemish government to have an open science policy with a budget, of course. And these initiatives, with a few others, initiated the Flemish Open Science Board. So this is approved by the Flemish government in December 2019 and formally formed in February 2020. It's on open science, but the first emphasis is on research data management, because there is a lot of things we still need to do for research data management. And the goal is to professionalize and extend research data management in Flanders by providing money to have data stewards within the research performing organizations, to aid to have a good infrastructure, and to connect to the European Open Science Cloud. So these are the first goals of this Flemish Open Science Board, but this can be extended. We have a roadmap we have to adhere to up to 2024. And we have KPIs on ORCID, so an obligation for ORCID, open access to publications, fair and open data, and data management plan. So we have quite some work ahead of us, but it's really helping us because it also gives a framework with a budget to work with. And the last thing I want to say about Belgium is that for years already we have an informal work group, Open Access Belgium. So before we had any policy on whatever level, we as open science enthusiasts, first open access, but now generally open science enthusiasts, we have an informal Belgian network, which is supported also by Ghent University from the OpenAIRE perspective, because we are the national open access desk for OpenAIRE in Belgium. With specific information on the Flanders and Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles information on open science. So this is an important network we work with. And then of course you have the European Commission supporting open science. So that's, so you have Ghent University, you have the Flemish and Belgian government, and then we have Europe to work with. And European Commission already for years supports open science. For example, Carlos Moedas had the tagline, open science, open innovation, and open to the world. As a funder, Horizon 2020 mandates open access to publications, and then there was the data pilot, research data pilot, and some open science projects. They enable collaboration within and between the member states and the European Commission, and they make a lot of policy recommendations. We're going to Horizon Europe, the next framework program starting this year, which I mentioned before. So there will be some open science themes in that framework, like open access to publications in a plan as environment, so immediate open access. A data management plan is recommended, but they evolve from an open data pilot to a global, more complete research data management. They are an enabler, so they support with the European Open Science Cloud, for example. The European Open Science Cloud wants to become a European hub for research in Europe, of course, with infrastructures from both European and national and even regional size that they connect to the Open Science Cloud. So certainly for interdisciplinary projects that you can find research information within the Open Science Cloud from different levels, from different infrastructures, all in one hub. It's a discovery hub mainly. So normally research communities will still work within their own data environments, their research infrastructures, but these research infrastructures should connect to European Open Science Cloud and should be able to be interoperable with other systems. So it's standardization of architecture, of fair data, working on skills and training. So really make sure that you can collaborate. That's the main point, in a transparent way. And for open access to publications, because as I said, in Horizon Europe, it will be an obligation for immediate open access. They created Open Research Europe, ORE, which is an open access platform to publish publications. First of all, coming from European projects, but they want to expand it later on for others as well. So it's a platform with peer review. So you can put your publication in a preprint on the platform, and then it will be peer reviewed, and then you have the outcome of the peer review. Now there are already admitting submissions. So they have started with submissions now, but the real launch will be around March with peer-reviewed publications. This is powered by F1000 Research, which also powers the Wellcome Trust's open access platform. And on the European level, a last word I want to say is about European University Association, because it has become an important player within European policy. On the one hand, they talk to the European Commission about the general things of European universities and how they work together. On the other hand, they provide advice and information to their members coming from the European Commission, but also from everywhere, of course, but they are an important enabler of communication between European universities and European Commission. So for example, in the working group on open science, I'm in of the European University Association, we talk a lot with European Commission about Horizon Europe and what is the open science, what's open science all about in Horizon Europe, and how can EOA support that vision, and on the other hand, what do we think more investment should be made in support or whatever to make sure that it's done. So the European University Association is an important player there. To end with, I want to say a few words about OpenAIRE, because Sibcha and myself, we are both involved in OpenAIRE, of course, as the open access infrastructure for research in Europe. And the aims of OpenAIRE are to support open science, to have a human network, because this is really important. We really have a nice, big human network of open science experts in every country in Europe and associated countries. And also, I'm very happy to have to be in connection with Simha here in Israel. So the human network supports the collaboration, supports training, supports working groups promoting open science. We do that as a National Open Access Desk in Belgium. Simha and her team are doing the same in Israel. OpenAIRE supports, on the other hand, infrastructure, so the technical part is important as well. I talked about interoperability. But OpenAIRE has a big research graph that we work on, interoperable repositories, open access journals, publishing platforms, and all these kind of things around Europe and beyond. They are harvested within OpenAIRE. Information is interconnected, data and publications are connected with projects, etc., etc. So it's a big hub of European research, and you can see what's open, what's not, and these kind of things. And as said, we collaborate not only within Europe, but globally as well. We work together a lot with the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, where we interact and talk about interoperability of repositories and how to make sure that they stay updated enough and modern enough, let's say. And we work with the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services, which supports some crucial tools for open science that we use within our systems. We work across the ocean with Revalik, which is a South American coalition, and with the OECD, we also are in connection with them on open science. But these are just a few of the global collaboration actions within OpenAIRE. And to end with everything I said, but nothing, COVID-19 is a terrible virus disease. This virus is taking us hostage, as to say, but it shows the way to collaboration and the importance of open science. And also with OpenAIRE, in a European context, we made the COVID-19 gateway because there's a lot of information within this OpenAIRE research graph. And we make this gateway on COVID-19. And you can see here that this screenshot was taken yesterday. There are more than 205,000 publications, 8,277 research data sets, the software and other research artifacts, which are all bound together within this gateway. And this is data that can be shared, can be reused, and you have a lot of information there. And this shows, and some other initiatives on this level, how important open science is. This collaboration and transparency is key in the quick response that we have all over the world on COVID-19. This is really an enabler of open science, of excellent science, and giving a benefit to the world, to the whole community, to the whole society. That is my basic conclusion for this lecture. There is this global theme we want to work on, and we have to work on different levels to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Inge, for such an impressive presentation. It was great. We have a long way to go in Israel, but the target is known and we are going there. There are a few questions in the chat, so I want to read it to you. Are there any standards for the new raw data regarding privacy?
Well, with raw data is always another thing. Raw data, but coming from machines, are facts, and there it's difficult to have. You have exchange formats, so there's the standardization. But standards regarding privacy, it depends. you actually most of the time do not know a lot about privacy in data. I'm not an expert on privacy of data. I'm telling this in advance. But there is the GDPR in Europe. The GDPR regulates how you handle privacy within the European Union, and there are quite some rules. What we do in a data management plan within DMP Online for FWO, for example, is to explain when you have data which are private, so privacy-related data, how you handle them, what you're going to do with it. So there's quite some process about that. So this is standardized within the template to describe a project. But of course, the data itself, the standardization depends on what kind of data it is. So it's actually more of standardization on how to express the accessibility of data than expressing the privacy nature of data. But again, this evolves quite quickly. So maybe within RDA, so the Research Data Alliance, there are already things going on about how to express on the standardized way privacy of data.
Sarah is asking, how do you manage to treat all different kind of data?
Well, I think we don't manage all different kind of data at this moment. That is one of the problems and one of the reasons why we have to shift to better research data management, because a lot of data, different kind of data, is not managed in the right way. And certainly proprietary data is difficult because you don't know how these proprietary data, how they work, and you cannot exchange them. So how do you treat them? First of all, of course, you need to preserve them. You have to analyze them. But if you don't have the tools to access it, it's a really tough one. So one of the things within FAIR data is to move more to widely accepted, transparent kinds of data. So not in proprietary format, but in a more exchangeable format. But there's still quite some things to do there. So I cannot say that we manage all different kind of data, no.
Luba is asking, what is the level of involvement of libraries in writing of DMP? How many library staff is occupied in the OA processing in your university?
Yeah, so we have this data steward team of 6 people. They communicate, they give training. They sometimes look at DMPs, but they cannot do everything. So that is not possible. What we try to do is to create a rubric to evaluate, so that you yourself can evaluate a DMP as a researcher. So we help you with that. And this data steward team is part of the library. So this is 6 people. Then I myself work there on, I work mainly on copyright and the projects and open access to publications. And then I have my colleague who works on OpenAIRE. And basically that is the dedicated open science team at the moment in our library in Ghent University. Of course, in our development team, there are a few people that part-time work for our tools or the repository. We have these kind of people too, of course.
Professor Daphne Raban is asking, if I understand the business models correctly, it seems that the missing model is that of the public goods, i.e. all publication must be paid for privately by researchers with or without grants. What is the responsibility of the government and the government-funded universities? Is there a discussion in Europe about science as a public good?
Yeah, this actually is the basis. If you look at responsible research and innovation and open science, this question of publicly funded science is an important concept. So when you have science research being paid for with public money, public budget, being the European Commission's money, Belgian money, Flanders money. It is not fair that this is kept closed and that it's not open for everyone to reuse because all the taxpayers have paid for it. So when you look at it from that angle, research as a public good is an important concept. And this is the basis of the first open science measures within Horizon 2020 and now in Horizon Europe to open it up much more to all citizens and the European Commission in Europe to be able to work with the data. I'm not completely sure about the business model. There are many business models. There are business models where you, like the European Commissions with the Open Research Europe platform, the Open Access platform, where the funder takes the responsibility to host a platform, not only host it, pay for it, to make sure that publications get great dissemination and that they are peer reviewed and that you have a qualitative trusted platform where the author and the reader don't have any payments to make because the funder takes care of it. I think that is a business model that goes in that direction, what you mean. But of course, there are many of these kinds, many different business models. But I suppose that that answers a bit the question.
Can one use DMP online if their institution is not registered? I have not managed in the past. What is required for an institute to register?
General DMP Online is hosted in Edinburgh, yeah, I think it's Edinburgh, by DCC, the Digital Curation Center. And normally anyone can use it, I thought. You don't have to be, but I'm not completely sure, but you have to look at DMP Online at DCC to answer that question. Normally you can have templates there from your own institution, but I haven't been involved in DMP Online myself, so I can't answer in detail, but normally you should be able to do it, I thought.
And what about thesis and dissertation of your university? Are there any unique policies about their open access and deposit of thesis?
Yes, for doctoral thesis have to be deposited in our academic bibliography, and the researcher, him or herself, decides on whether to open it or not. We don't oblige them to. Of course, for their publications, because many of the doctoral theses are actually a combination of publications. For the publications, they have to adhere to the research policy, so the mandated deposit and optional open access. But the thesis itself has to be deposited as well, and we encourage to open it up. But it's a decision of the researcher.
And do you see a change in their researcher policy? Is there researcher publish as a result of the way are evaluated?
It's too early to say because it's only 2 years ago that we started with a new evaluation. And it's indeed a question that we get a lot, but at this moment we cannot say a lot about it. Also, our research department, that's actually part of another section within our university. And I think they will follow up later on because they will want to evaluate that, but it's too soon to do that. Too early.
Do researchers hold the copyright over the data of the research, or does it belong to the university?
So the research data is owned by the university. Publications, on the other hand, the author always is right holder of it, his or her publication. But we do have a regulation that says that research is owned by the university. So yeah, that's actually the answer to this question, I think.
I think that's it. A lot of thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to do that.
Is there any question? Other question?
It was question written by Dalia about the difference between green and gold.
Sorry.
Yeah, you just missed it.
Yeah, I missed it.
Yeah.
Yes, could you please define the differences between gold and green open access?
Yeah, so gold open access is about immediately publishing open access through an open access journal or platform, while green open access is depositing a version of your text in a repository. Now, the boundaries between the two become vaguer and vaguer. If you look at open access platforms, open access repositories can open up texts as well. But more typically for open access platforms and journals is that they will install, of course, a peer review system upon their platform so that you really have all the kind of services that you would expect from a publisher, from a publication process, while a repository in the green open access is more providing the infrastructure to open up a text and to make sure it is disseminated widely all over the world, whether it's published within a classical subscription journal, an open access journal, or an open access platform.
I think that's it.
Okay, Inge, just first of all, thank you so much. It was fascinating, and I just want to share my thoughts. I understand that in Belgium and in all the European countries, it came to the universities from a national level and from governments. We are here in a different situation. We still do not have a Israeli policy on open science and on open something, you name it. But we have, I think, a kind of opposite direction. We are acting in the universities and hope to bring all this bottom up to our government, and in hope that it will be also the national policy and the national regulation.
Yeah, here it started actually bottom up as well. So it was first implemented within universities before we had this Flemish policy. Don't forget, we only have this Flemish Open Science Board, for example, since 1 year. So in the universities, we have open access and then open science policies years ago. So it was quite bottom up as well. So it's not uncommon. There are just a few countries where you really have quite a top-down approach.
Yeah. Thank you. And something which is totally not connected, I'm just watching now on Netflix Undercover series, Belgium, and I enjoyed Tom Waits so much. Great movie.
Yeah, I can imagine. Many people like Tom Waits.
Yeah, yeah.
That's true. Well, enjoy it, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inge. It was a great pleasure to have you here. And it was a very good lecture and very informative. And I'm sure we all learned a lot from your talk. Thank you.
Yeah,
no problem. Thank you for inviting me.
To get you here in Israel when all this COVID thing will finish.
Yeah, that would be better.
Thank you so much, Inge.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.